Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
And we're back, and Emma Irwin, I got to get her name right, on Resilience Development in Action. Correct. We're talking about suicide. We were just having a conversation about finding someone who was hanging. It was just known as a death, and suddenly you show up, it's a hanging with young kids, and you never cry on scene. And it sounds crazy, but that was difficult for you and whatever. Well,
that's the issue I had, yeah.
Okay, so let me start off. And this goes not just for you. I'm talking to the audience too, because a lot of them are first responders, but I'm going to look you in the eye. Of course, it's not fucking crazy. You just saw someone who died and did it on their own in front of their fucking kids. Sorry.
And I would say that to someone else. Yeah, I would say that to someone else. It's quite a normal response.
It's a normal response to an abnormal situation. Yeah. And yes, civilians may not I get that they would be really, because they're not used to that stuff. In your particular case, it's something that you deal, but it's an abnormal situation. Yeah. One of the things that people do is like, oh, it's an abnormal situation I reacted normally to, therefore I'm crazy. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I think it's because in our roles as a frontline worker, fireman, police, paramedic, whatever you are, I think you sort of have this, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't expect to react that way. You're expected to deal with it. And to manage it and to be calm for everyone else on scene. And I think I wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't that I was embarrassed about crying, because I know that I'm allowed to get upset about things. I think it was the fact that I got emotional so suddenly, like I didn't have time to leave the room. I was in front of people and I wasn't expecting the overwhelming emotion. And I only found out that this was the cause of, I'll tell you some of my symptoms I had after, but I only found out during therapy. I had EDMR therapy, which is the sort of rapid eye movement therapy.
The MDR is something I do myself, so I know exactly what it is.
Yeah, so I had that, and I only needed 1 or 2 sessions because it was that one episode. It wasn't lifelong trauma.
Not that I want you to have one, but so lucky it was just one.
Yeah, I only had a couple of sessions, and we addressed so after this event, for a couple of weeks I was sort of okay. I was thinking about it, as you do with one of those. There was nothing. So I think what's important is, as soon as we finished that job, we were going to head back to station for sort of a debrief, but we got a cardiac arrest a road over, so that I then had to go and do another cardiac arrest, and he passed. And that was more of a elderly person, sort of quite unwell and expected. So, but I think going straight into another job didn't help. And I think we reflected in my therapy that a debrief is very important and should have happened in this situation. I shouldn't have been allowed to go to another job. But, you can't say no when it's the road over, can you? You can't in that moment. And that's where management should have said no for us, I think, in that situation. But yeah, in the couple of weeks after, I felt okay. And then a few weeks down the line, I started getting very anxious at work, and I'm a very confident person at work, and I started getting very anxious, and with my abilities, my decision making sort of internally, and I gave a drug error because I was so anxious. No one was injured. It was a lady she wasn't anaphylactic, but she was having a severe allergic reaction, and I gave her IM adrenaline, and we're supposed to split the dose with 5 minutes intervals in between. I gave her the full dose. So she just felt very sick. She felt very sick, vomited. Other than that, she was fine, and she thanked me for feeling better. So we were all okay, but I've never done that before. And I knew that I'd done that because I was getting very anxious, and that for me meant something was very wrong. And from then I went off work. And I think that's how I recognized it. So I went off sick. And from then it just sort of spiraled, really. I was having panic attacks leaving the house. I was seeing bad things wherever I went. I'd walk up to the shop and I was seeing car accidents happening, not necessarily relating to hangings, but someone dropping dead in front of me. It was like everything just kicked up.
Right.
And I have the same window that she had at home, and I was imagining myself hanging in the window. And I did one of my assessments with occupational therapy when I was off, and to go through to the therapy, and they said, have you been suicidal? And I said, well, no, I've been seeing these visions, but I'm not suicidal. I don't want to die, but I just had such intrusive thoughts, I guess it is. like really intrusive thoughts. And yeah, I was off for about 8 weeks and had the EDMR. And through that and replaying the scene, I was having panic attacks when I was getting out of breath. And it was all internal. It was all me losing control of the on scene and crying. I lost control of my emotions, and that's what it all came down to. And so all my symptoms after were me feeling out of control and losing control of, feeling out of breath, walking up a hill, or not controlling what's going on around me and how people are driving around me. It was just such random things, but it all came down to like a lack of control because I'd cried on scene, which I just find really interesting.
Well, I do too, because I hear the lack of control, and I don't want to do your therapy, so I got to be mindful here. So I got to walk a line, but I see the lack of control, but I also see this, oh my God, shouldn't I be able to handle this? Shouldn't I be able to do this? Shouldn't I be this lack
I lost
of
confidence in my capability.
The confidence played a factor because, the other part too, that I think in our field, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I encourage my officers, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, dispatch. I say, look, there's something called passive suicidality. You don't want to die when you're like, I wish sometimes I wasn't here, or I had these visions sometimes that I'm dead. And people are like, oh my God, you're going to take my gun away. You're going to do this. No, you need to be honest about these things so you can get through to the other side.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you want it. Yeah, it was just these visions, but things really spiraled then. But I knew luckily I'd picked up that something wasn't right because of how anxious I was feeling before that. So I was off and I'd already got the ball rolling on therapy. And through work, I think my manager put in for the therapy, and 2 weeks later I had my first session. So it was super quick, and I was off for 8 weeks in total. And then after that, I loved being a paramedic. I really did. But I think moving to a new service and then within 2 years, all of this happening, I think just sort of ruined it for me. I wasn't really that good friends with anyone there. I hadn't really fully settled, and I'd moved from one station to another. So I'd only been a year at the station I was at. And I don't think there was enough people around me that I was close to in order for me to stay. I think I was in London for 6 years, and I had a lot of good friends in London, and I was really close to people in London. I think if I'd have been there, I might have stayed after all of this. But I think just being where I was, I just didn't feel comfortable enough. And it just put me off. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I just lost confidence in myself, but I found other things that I want to do more in life. I love dogs. I've got my dog. I'll send you some pictures.
Yeah, we need those pictures. There's a lot of dog lovers here. If I don't put up pictures,
I can bring the dog. So I decided I wanted to walk dogs and get some exercise and keep fit. So I went part-time at work as a paramedic, and I opened a little dog walking business, and I started walking dogs part-time. But with shift work, that didn't really work out. And I thought, I've got to think about what's good for me in life. And I thought, doing shift work and carrying on as a paramedic isn't what I'm going to enjoy anymore. I didn't enjoy it. So I left, but I didn't want to lose being a paramedic, in case one day I want to go back to it. So the job I'm doing now means I can keep my registration, and I can walk dogs, and I can do things I enjoy, and I've got a 9-to-5 life. Yeah. And I'm enjoying it so far. And there's no trauma.
Right. Well, debatable.
I don't have to sit in anyone's dirty house.
Sorry, there's trauma everywhere, in my opinion.
There is. Okay, no, I agree.
My one of my best mentors says to me and to a lot of people, therapy exists for two reasons: unresolved grief or unresolved trauma. If you take care of both of them, you probably will not need therapy. And to me, that's a great measurement of what it is. And I think that for keep your license going and all that, I think that when you say you're not close to everyone, that's another conversation I had with other people who had trouble with their work because, you go to a call, maybe you had a problem with it and all that. Then the next call comes in. If you have no one on your department or, on the ambulance or in the company, whatever you call them, to kind of like turn to talk to, then that makes the trauma worse. Yeah. And sometimes it's finding that if you don't have that, maybe it is best for you to either find another place or, like you said, keep your paramedic, do something different.
Yeah, try something different, do something you want to do. Yeah, don't get me wrong, they were very supportive. Like, they were very good about everything. The welfare was great for me.
Right.
but yeah, I just didn't feel comfortable in the position anymore. I think after like 6, 7 years, I feel like that's enough. Like you've seen it all. It's so exciting when you first start, isn't it? You know, blood, guts, gore, like fast driving, blue lights. Like you want to do it all. You want to see everything. Oh, I wanted a hanging so badly. It sounds awful, but I wanted to go to these
If I had
horrible
a
jobs.
dime for every time I heard that, I have about a $10
Yeah.
bill here.
And now, like 6 years later, it's like I don't want to do any of it. And you know, you've either got the blood, guts, gore, trauma stuff, which I've seen it all now, and it's just every time you go, it just makes you a bit sadder. And then the rest of it just is relatively boring to me now. There's no middle ground. It's either people that don't need an ambulance or it's traumatizing jobs. And I think I've had enough of that.
Well, I think that's so common. A lot of people, like you say, the blood and gore and all that. And oh, I want to see my first hanging and this and that. And that's not
Yeah,
uncommon. I
you
hear
want to
that
see
all
it
the
all.
time.
Like
And then
morbid
until you
curiosity.
do see them.
Yeah, and then you're like, I don't know actually. But
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in America, but in England, in London especially, the like retention rate for staff is about 6 years before they leave.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know the numbers for the private ambulances around here. That's what they call them for, if you're working.
Mm.
But the numbers can be good. I mean, I think about the people I know. I can't think of anyone who stayed more than 2 years. I
No,
cannot
yeah,
think
and
of one
it's
person.
whether they go into another sort of paramedic related job like GP surgeries. In our GP surgeries, a lot of paramedics work in there prescribing and seeing patients in GPs. That's quite a common one for people to go into. But most people, if you ask anyone, I think in an ambulance service, are they looking for another job? They probably are.
And that's what I find in here too. And
Mm.
like in the private ambulance, you either get the repeat people who need the same drive to whatever, but you don't get to do the stuff that maybe is more interesting sometimes, and you get repetitive and repetitive and repetitive. And then
Yeah.
there's so much trauma someone can see before they get sick of it too.
Yeah, I wanted to be a critical care paramedic. That's what I wanted to do when I first became a paramedic, but I don't think I could handle seeing that all the time. So it's all you do is just trauma. It's all they go to. It's trauma and the dead and the dying constantly, and don't know if I could do that. I'd be I think I'd be very good at it. I was very good at things like that, but I just don't think like mentally it's worth it. I just don't think it is.
And I think it's all about what you knowing yourself is key because, like I had to see one dead body in my life. I was all good. Didn't need to see any more. I was all set. And
That was
even,
it.
like that's why I tell people I saw one, I'm good. I'm not talking about a funeral. I'm just talking about, having to go to a call. I've seen a hanging. I'm all set. No need on any other hanging. I'm good. Overdose on pills. Seen that. Like name it. I probably have been either involved or seen it myself. I think that you learn coping mechanisms. And for me, what I find fascinating is some of these guys who do well in their career for a long period of time and they see all this blood and guts, so to speak. They're like, how do you put up with people telling you their story and their trauma all the time? To me, that's nothing. That's easy. That's the easy part. Going to a scene regularly, that's not something I want to do. That would be too traumatic for me. So I think that's something
Yeah, like
that's also the trauma that works for you. But go ahead.
yeah, I mean, secondhand trauma and hearing it is just as traumatic over time. It's one of those things that builds up, isn't it? Rather than an initial episode, like if you saw it. But I don't know. I always thought I was very resilient. There's nothing wrong with not being able to handle certain things. But I always thought I was very resilient, and I probably still am. But I think that that incident just knocked me off completely. I don't think I can like look past the effect it had now. It makes me nervous. Like, what if something else happened and the effect was more? Like if I didn't get that therapy, what would have happened after 8 weeks? I don't know. I was
Well,
having such severe symptoms. Like they were really bad. Like I was hanging in the window in my mind while sitting in the
right.
living room. I couldn't leave the house with the bad symptoms. It's not just a bit of anxiety. They were really intrusive thoughts and,
Well,
if I
panic
didn't
attacks, you said too.
yeah, I was having full blown panic attacks because I went to take my bike. I'd just got a bike and I thought, I'll go for a bike ride. 'Kay. I took the bike out the front door and just had a panic attack because the thought of taking this bike out and getting out of breath, and it was just like silly stuff, like nothing over nothing. I just couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. So if I didn't have therapy, I don't know how I would have I had a medication as well, which I just
Okay.
came off of. So I was on the medication, yeah, probably about 6 months, and I just came off of that. But I don't know what I would have ended up like in another 5 weeks waiting for therapy. So I think that made me nervous. I think it knocked me, and now I've got a bit of anxiety, I think, over how I cope with things.
Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode. So, speaking of which, one of the things you mentioned a few times, and it's something I want to talk about, is coping mechanisms. Because you're going to, coping mechanisms are so key, in my opinion, to this type of environment. And for the record, in case anyone asks, and I know I have some smart asses people who listen to this, alcohol is not a solution, despite being,
No, it wasn't.
EPOH. It is not a solution. But we need coping mechanisms that are not like that.
Yes, that are not going to hurt you further.
Exactly. So do you have any type of coping mechanisms that you suggest or that you've used in the front line that helped you?
I mean, the main one is talking to other people, which is like one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I think sharing and the amount of times I mentioned it to someone at work and they told me a similar story, they had a similar event, a similar time during work that they'd had the same thing. And I was like, okay, so I'm not like actually going crazy. Like this is quite a normal response. Whereas if I hadn't spoken to people, I probably would have thought that I was, having some really silly response and I was being ridiculous. And they made it like grounded it and made me, what's the word? Made it normal for me, like a normal response. They made me realize that's a normal response. And I spoke to family and I spoke to my brother, and he is a fireman and he'd gone to something and had a similar response. And I never knew about it. And I spoke to him. I was telling him like what was happening and the symptoms I was having. I couldn't leave the house. And he said he had the same thing. And that helped so much, just talking to someone else who had been through it and talking to people that haven't been through it. It's better if they've been through it. But talking to anyone about it really helped. And knowing when something's not right. So the fact that I was getting anxious whilst doing my job to the point where I gave a medication error, that was not normal for me. Like that's not something I do. So I think recognizing that and taking time off work was really important to cope with it so that I could, figure out what I needed to do next. And that was to speak to my managers, to ask for help and to get therapy started and to have an occupational therapy assessment. I think a lot of people sit on these signs and don't know. You've got to have self-awareness, I think, is like the key words. Self-awareness.
Self-awareness is so key for coping mechanisms
Yeah.
and knowing where you're at. I agree 100%.
Yeah. So I think having self-awareness and like good insight into who you are and how you cope with things is key.
One of the conversations I would argue, and this is something that you tell me how it is in England, in the United States too, this is not something that people like to do. But for me personally, I think it's also, it sounds terrible the way I'm going to say it, but calling out people. Hey, Emma, you're not looking good. What's going on?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Having someone who calls you out on it, as much as it will create a defense mechanism in you, the coping mechanism is like, shit, someone did actually care to ask me.
Yeah, and we have quite a good culture on my station, at least. We had quite a good culture where you can, if you're worried about someone, it's not snitching if you go and tell someone about it. People actually appreciate if you don't feel comfortable asking them, if you went to a manager and say, look, they're just not acting quite how they normally would, or, I'm a bit worried about them. That was actually something that I think most people would appreciate. in the workplace. It's not like you've gone behind my back, and most people would appreciate that. But I think it was also a culture where you could just approach people anyway. Like, I feel like even if I didn't know someone very well, I could say like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" And my crewmate, when I did the drug area, he actually recognized. I'd only worked with him a few times, but he recognized that this wasn't like right. And I was talking to him, and he was like, And then I spoke to one of like my best friends at work, and she's friends with him, and he was talking to her, and then I spoke to her, and they were like, "Yeah, you need to go." And so they supported me as well to make that decision. And yeah, recognizing behavior changes in people is really important.
I think
My boyfriend actually was the one that said you need to. I think you've got some sort of like PTSD or something because of the. So he even recognized it, and he's not medical at all. He works for Google, so he's like the least medical person in the world.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, like, he cares enough for you that way. Hold on to
Yeah,
him.
he noticed it. He
Good,
noticed I was
good human.
irritable, and things that I'm quite a happy-go-lucky person normally. I'm quite relaxed, but yeah, I was irritable in the house. I was barely leaving, so he picked up on those things, and that helped as well.
I was gonna joke around. There's easygoing people in England. Shocker.
There's not many.
Sorry.
Maybe it's just me.
Sorry. I pick on every culture's equally.
We
So
love
it's
a
not
good confrontation here, don't we?
Yes, but like Americans are not used to that. They see the stereotype and they're like, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "No, they're not confronting
We
you."
just like having opinions. We've got our own opinions, and we'll happily share them. But I feel like Americans do as well, though.
No, the difference is that if you tell me some opinion I don't agree with, you won't care and you won't try to convince me.
Oh
Here,
yeah,
you got to convince someone that they're right. And I think
yeah.
if we stop doing that, that'd be helpful.
Just agree to disagree. That's quite a common phrase here.
I,
We say we'll just agree to disagree, and that's the end of the conversation.
I mean, I grew up in Canada and I'm a French speaker first before I'm English. So believe me, I've had enough conflict with the English in my lifetime. And yet we still haven't, I've never shot someone. I've never hurt someone.
Yeah.
Why? Because we agree to disagree and we move on. We don't need to
move on. Yeah, no.
So, I don't know.
I don't know. Work on the ambulance service in a town here and have a fight with a drunk person, and maybe you'll disagree.
But
they can be very expressive and very stubborn.
But you talked about coping mechanisms earlier. I think that's another great coping mechanism is saying, "Hey, listen, I don't agree with you. You're not going to agree with me. We can still talk to each other. We're just not going to agree." To me, that's the other coping mechanism too, is that yes, you need people. You need to be able to talk.
You need the right people.
Right. But you also need to be able to be open to that conversation, both sides. Because
you've got to be open to people saying things you don't want to hear.
And I think that that's the biggest barrier here, because I find that some places someone will be like, Emma's not doing good. Oh, did you tell her that? No, I want you to say it. Why me? Why can't you go tell Emma? Oh, I don't know if she's going to take it well. Who gives a shit if she takes it well or not? Go talk to her.
Yeah. At least you've told her. Yeah.
If you say to her, "You look like shit," that's probably not the best way to say it. Say, "Hey, Emma, you know what? You haven't been yourself lately. You're kind of like acting differently, and I don't really know you well. Are you okay?"
I think most people would respect and appreciate someone doing that, wouldn't they? I know I would.
Well, I would too. And I think there's a lot of people here who will never say on record that that's what they want. But sometimes when
but they would appreciate it. And even they might give a stress response, people might not respond well to it, but I think deep down that will help them in some way.
How many times have I heard someone ask that question? "Hey, you don't look good. What's going on?" They leave, but because they opened that door 3-4 hours later, 3-4 days later,
rolling, doesn't it? Yeah.
I think that's another great coping mechanism. Tell people when they're not doing good and ask them what they're doing and if they need support. I think that the culture is not there around here. We recently had, and a few months ago, there's a woman who had just become a police officer and had some mental health issues, but didn't know who to turn to, and unfortunately committed suicide. And, if she knew who to reach out to, or she would have been open to getting reached out. I don't know. And I don't want to blame the victim in any way, shape, or form. But the environment here is, if you can't handle it the first year, what type of police officer, firefighter, paramedic, MMT, dispatcher are you going to be? I think there's a culture shift that has to occur that, maybe they didn't handle this one right, but give them 5 years. If you can't handle it for 5 years, then we'll have a conversation.
I think the culture, in our ambulance service, I think has improved massively. Since I joined, so I've been in there I guess in the last 6, 7 years, that's pretty new and recent. It's been around a long time. There's people that have been in the ambulance service 30 years on my station. I don't know how they've done it. But I think since I joined, I've always found, I don't know if that's just the energy I give out as well and, the respect I give off, but I've always found people to be very respectful and supportive of me and of other people. And I know there's always going to be bullying. There's always going to be racism. There's always going to be hatred somewhere. It's always going to happen. There's always going to be someone that does that. But I think, and I'm obviously of a privileged position, I'm a white female who, I'm not going to come across a lot of that, but never did I ever have anyone, laugh at me for getting upset on a job or, take the mick out of anyone's trauma. Everyone was very supportive and
Right.
very, the smallest thing can bring on some trauma or make you upset. And people were very supportive of that, which I don't think it always used to be like. It used to be like, you don't get upset about things. And I think we still think that. I think that's why I had that traumatic response and the thoughts that why did I act like that? I think we still expect ourselves to be able to handle things. But yeah, I think as a service, they don't have that culture. Definitely not as much anymore, which is good.
I mean, I've only been doing this for about 27 years, give or take. And I've seen a shift like in the culture in this time. I'm saying that there's a lot of improvements to be had, but at the same time, I've seen the shift.
Sexual harassment is still rife. That's something they need
That
to
never happens. Women do not get harassed in their job.
No,
of
it
course
doesn't
not.
happen, of course. That was another thing I had to deal with in the new ambulance service, which in CCAM, which didn't help, I think, with me not enjoying it the last 2 years. I ended up as part of to be fair, I wasn't even a big part of it, but I was working with a guy. He said some inappropriate comments. It was my first shift on that station. He was the first person I'd met, and he didn't say anything about me personally, but it was about like his sex life and stuff. And it's like, this makes me feel uncomfortable. I sort of left it because it wasn't anything about me, and I thought maybe he's just a bit, too open. And then I spoke to a couple of other females, and one of them, she's my friend now, she had a worse experience with him and hadn't really spoken to anyone about it. And I was like, oh, this isn't sounding good. And then it turned out there was another person, so I was like, we need to go and like speak to someone. So I sort of got the ball rolling on that and said, you need to come with me, and we reported it. And so we ended up with a whole incident there, which probably didn't help. But and Southeast Coast Ambulance Service is in the news now for someone that's been fired, sexual misconduct against students. It happens more often than you'd think.
I mean, it's not quite omerta, but it's a version of omerta, if you ask me, of like, don't talk about it.
Yeah. It is. Please don't talk about it. And when we reported it, it was all dealt with appropriately. But the manager of the station, he called us in and thanked us for reporting it. And he said, we've been aware of his conduct for years and no one's done anything. And it wasn't until you guys actually came forward. He said, I think everybody's been aware of it. Everybody talks about it, but no one reports it. And he said, we need to be acting on conversations we're hearing, not just people that are reporting it. So he, thanked us for reporting it, but he said, sorry, we hadn't dealt with it sooner, so that you had to feel the need to report it. I think when you're hearing talks around the station as a manager, you need to act on those and not just wait for someone to file a report.
Well, if you ask me, if there's smoke, there's fire. And if you hear smoke,
everyone knew what he was like. There's no way. Which is why I reported it, because it's not a one-off thing.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do a firefighter analogy, but here we are.
My brother will love it.
But yeah, no, I think that's what I kind of tell people is that don't wait. You don't need to have proof. If there's smoke, I'm not going to say, I'll wait till the fire, the flames really show up before I get upset. No, bring it up. And that's important. And again, and if this offends anyone, I frankly don't care. Women in the service of paramedics, EMTs, fire, and police get a lot more sexual harassment than they let on. And they put up with it.
And I think it depends what you'd put up with. I would put up with a certain level. Like, if I know someone's a good person and they're just joking around, or, there's someone a bit older and that's just how they're used to talking, but I know they're completely harmless, things like that. There's like a certain level of banter I can have. I'm very good at having sort of banter and knowing someone's character. But when I don't know you and I've never met you and you're telling me these horrible things about your sex life, like, that's creepy. Don't do that.
It's not.
I don't know what you're like. I'm stuck in an ambulance with you for 12 hours.
And it's no longer banter.
No, it's not. It's just awkward.
I can banter with the best of them, but when it gets awkward, I tell people,
you banter like that with someone you know, not someone you don't know.
And I'll finish on my little rant here by saying,
yeah,
if it smells like a rose and looks like a rose, you don't need to be pricked to know it's a rose. But if it smells like shit and looks like shit, you don't need to lick it to know it's shit. So therefore, if it feels uncomfortable, say something, because it's uncomfortable. It doesn't mean like it might get comfortable eventually.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Having done this great analogy that people always go like, ugh, how can we reach you? I mean, this is about, we've gone for about an hour, which is really great, but I would like to know how people can reach you.
Yeah, I have Instagram.
Okay.
Bear with me because I don't actually know what it is. So just bear with me. I'm on Facebook, Emma Irwin. If anyone wants to send me an email, like if anyone wants to talk about anything, that I'm always open for a conversation. If anyone's experienced anything like I have and they just want to talk to someone that's been through something similar, you can email me. Do you want me to just say my email?
You can send it to me and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll send it to you and we'll put it in the show notes. I'll put like my Instagram, my email, and I've got my own podcast. It's a true crime podcast, so I'll send that. It's called The Last and the Lost.
I mean, that fascinates a lot of people here. So
yeah, I'll send that over as well. I know there's loads out there these days, so we'll see if I can.
My girlfriend will probably just listen to it because you said you had one, so that's how it is.
I'll send it all over.
Well, I'll go listen to it too, actually. So what's the name of the podcast?
The Last and the Lost. So
we'll put that in the show notes, everything, if you want to reach her. But, Emma, I got to tell you that I did not, you meet someone online, you're like, how is it going to be? This hour flew by. It was a great conversation and truly appreciate your candor. And I hope some people are listening are going to appreciate it too. So thank you for your time.
Hopefully, that's why I'm here. Just hopefully someone hears it and it helps someone.
And you can go to England and know how things go there. Which
come visit me.
What?
I'll show you around. You around Ashford.
and just to put a little cherry on top here, don't go to Oxford University. You'll get spit on. Anyway.
Yeah.
have a great rest of the day and thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.